Tier 2 and 3 awareness, symbiotic masses of microbiological consciousness. Picking up where we left off from Tier 1 life forms, I'm going to do both 2 and 3 in this video. These expressions of consciousness are the product of emergence from millions of years of rolling the dice of interactions between all the phenotype expressions of microorganisms and the environment. Masses of microorganisms influencing each other under the constraints of the universal law to take the path of least resistance. Strength in numbers makes it much easier to survive, and this also perpetuates specialization that in turn affects epigenetics. I postulate that eventually a conglomerate of microorganisms that contained magnetite became a colonized primitive brain. As microorganisms interacted with this colony, mechanisms for chemical communication likely emerged. The microorganisms that contained magnetite had the ability to sense the magnetic field of Earth and find the silt. Between their ability to use magnetic fields as a directional compass to find food, and then the adaptation of chemical communication with the other microorganisms, the path of least resistance was for the magnetite microorganisms to use other types of microorganisms as possibly a protective barrier for the elements, or predation. The other microorganisms benefited by finding food easier, or being led to a more conducive environment. Another side of the dice was adapted, and therefore more possibilities presented. Now all that's left is rolling those dice over and over again for many years. The product of all of this is that we end up with what we call animals. Insects, shellfish, and eventually lizards and mammals. Tier 2 phenotype expressions of our biology are capable of different forms of communication as well as programmable to a certain regard. They have a primitive ability for processing the stimuli in the environment, which is a simple form of cause and effect analysis, and then they have a certain number of reactions to choose from. Those reactions are a product of genetic memory, but there is still a processing that occurs before choices are made. Even Tier 2 life forms such as ants have the ability to choose fight or flight. Ants also have the ability to create very simple mapping, and they do this with pheromone trails. Most Tier 2 forms of consciousness are largely reactionary, but not completely. Many are hive mentality. If we look at this in stages of development, you can see how the hive mentality is an adaptation from the Tier 1 masses of microbiological symbiosis that were taking advantage of the magnetic microorganisms. As complexity increased, the queen becomes the Tier 2's hive brain, and the other type of ants within the hive are like the microorganisms that are just following to the silt. Side note, 80% of Earth's total biomass is insect, so technically we live on a bug planet. Again, the entire ecosystem of Earth is just one life, of which we are expressions of that life, and again, we stand on the shoulders of all of the lesser expressions of biology, like insects, as well as microorganisms. Tier 2 life forms consolidate proteins so that Tier 3 consciousness doesn't have to spend calories doing that, because they rely on their prey to collect some of that resource for them. Then the Tier 3 life forms have more calories to spend towards the development of consciousness and the recording of memory. This state creates an epigenetic response to our phenotype expressions. Additional side thought, we look at this as a predator and prey relationship, but I propose that it's actually symbiotic. The insects do eat the excrement of Tier 3 life forms, and they eat Tier 3 life forms when they die. See? Symbiosis. Matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. You just have to follow cause and effect all the way through its cycles. Now there's a certain percentage of Tier 2 life forms that are not insects, obviously. Again, I remind you that it is not cut and dry, but rather there are varying degrees of these tiers of awareness. This is a developing theory, and we'll have to see how this theory continues to unfold. Exciting stuff for super nerds everywhere! Once we arrive at the level of Tier 3 awareness, we're really starting to cook with bacon grease. Tier 3 life forms are where dogs, cats, cows, and many other sentient life forms can be classified. Anybody who's spent a lot of time with these forms of consciousness understand that they are very aware. They are also very reactionary, but we cannot deny that there is a clear difference between a bug and a dog. An understanding of these life forms and/or complexity of consciousness can yield useful psychological information for the purpose of interacting or communicating with them. If we examine Tier 3 with my classification system in mind, then we identify solidified memory, they are programmable, they analyze cause and effect, they often take advantage of that ability in order to benefit in the future, and they are capable of creating a decent-sized mental map of their environment. This is a divergent hurdle, and noticeable consciousness is being expressed. Although the level is relatively simple in some regards, When we are in this form, we are not able to fathom the true complexity of our reality, and because we lack the ability to accumulate and pass on intricate knowledge pools from generation to generation. When we are in this form, we are only aware of immediate or easily accessible area awareness. We are not capable of expanded consciousness. Okay, again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for putting forth an effort to expand our knowledge pool and drink from the cup that runneth over. Thanks for joining the thought revolution. Please don't forget to subscribe, thumb up, and share. Next up is Tier 4 awareness, what we refer to as the average human.